We're segueing to talk about what has become the national debate of the past week and this week, with more twists and turns following President Donald Trump's remarks about Nigeria's categorization as a country of particular concern. The reverberations continue across and beyond Nigeria. It's time for us to look beyond what some of the headlines are saying and consider the political, social, economic fallout of some of the developments of the last 72 hours or more. And to help us navigate what this means for Nigeria and Nigerians, Dr. Suleiman Suleiman, former chairman of the Media Trust Editorial Board and a political analyst, is joining us for this segment. Doctor, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone has an opinion about this. It's one particular issue that has, again, highlighted Nigeria's fault lines, where we're divided across religious lines, regional lines, ethnic lines. But zooming out a little bit and giving an overview, what do you think this situation has cost Nigeria so far, if you have to consider the cost of this particular issue that we're discussing this evening?
It depends on what kinds of costs we're looking at. You know, something like this cannot be counted in naira and kobo, even though you can do that by looking at the crash in stock markets, or some people are talking about things like foreign investors being wary of the situation and therefore not coming to invest in the country again. But if you look at all these issues, in the first instance, the Nigerian economy is not that deeply integrated into the world economy in a way that if they sneeze there, we must catch cold here. Or if we sneeze here, then the rest of the world will catch cold. So I don't see that that impact is much. Even before this issue, we didn't have too many foreign investors coming into the country in the first place. I think the real cost, or the real costs for me, are diplomatic, political, and then, of course, in terms of our own national unity, you know. So diplomatically, it's not nice for Nigeria that while this thing is happening, we don't have any representation, for example, at the United Nations or even in the U.S. itself, you know, and so on, 2 years into and the interesting thing is, the president doesn't even have to appoint ambassadors. But if he's not appointing them, he has to do their job or get someone to do their job. So when this thing started, if we had an ambassador in the US or in the UN, chances are that they would have at least reacted, you know, and start to quieten things down. And even if it gets to this point, maybe it will have gotten here slower, you know, and giving us time to nip the whole thing in the bud. Yes.
Do you think Nigeria, or at least the administration, was taken aback by the tweet, the post put out by the American president?
Yes, but the point is, why did he even have to get to that point? Right. That's the real question, you know. I think in my thinking is, you see, I've always believed, and I've written about this, that President Tinubu has always, his strategy, his attention right now is mostly on 2027 election. So anything that doesn't have to do with 2027 election, he doesn't seem much interested in it, you know. So when this issue started, the kind of response that you would expect from the president wasn't there. For example, in my column last week, earlier this week, I compared Nigerian response to South African response, because Trump accused South Africa of genocide too.
Right.
You know, it's not
attacking the white population.
Yes,
right.
You know, which is similar to what we're having here now. You know, but the response, the way they responded was quite different. It was more professional. They took the matter serious, you know, and they dealt with it seriously. You know, to the extent that the South African president visited Trump, and that helped to quieten things. And even when he was there, he was even a lot of people, even the US media, were giving him more credit than their own president. They were giving Ramaphosa, the South African president, far more credit because of the way he conducted himself, even though Trump tried to show him videos of people that were being killed, some of whom were actually in the Congo.
There was a lot of misinformation in some of the rhetoric. Right?
Yes.
Right. And talk to me about what the disinformation that has also been identified in this conversation says about the belief in America, because Senator Cruz was also speaking. I mean, he posted a video a little over 24 hours ago claiming 50,000 Christians have been killed, 20,000 churches destroyed or burnt to the ground. Those are the numbers that he bandied around. However, the numbers don't add up with what some of the extensive reporting that has been done. Well, if you factor in the Boko Haram killings and everything that is still happening today, the numbers don't add up. So how much of that disinformation or misinformation should we factor into the conversation while not trying to dismiss the real experiences of other people?
Thank you very much. The thing is, two things here. The numbers add up from a strategic communication perspective for the Americans, because they know what they're doing. They know very well that there's no genocide here, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how much it helps, or the rhetoric helps to serve their interest, whatever those interests are. So as far as they are concerned, bandying numbers about helps people to remember, helps people to have an idea of the seriousness of what is going on. That's why you keep hearing them saying 50,000 people have been killed since 2009, this number of churches have been burnt, and so on. It's left for the Nigerian government and Nigerian stakeholders, because this goes beyond just the government. You understand? You know, as I said, in the case of South Africa, the entire society closed ranks, despite their differences, you know, to try to beat back and push back against what Trump was saying. So it's the same thing that you would expect here, but then Nigeria is not South Africa. But if you had people coming out and showing that, oh, we have 50,000 churches in Nigeria, or 20,000, or 200,000, or even 500,000 churches, because I want to believe we'll probably have more than 1 million churches in this country, because even Abuja alone, you'll probably find as many churches as you have housing, you know, and so on. That's how you find across the country, the number of churches and the number of mosques, they're so high. So just putting out these figures, you know, that so far this crisis has, taken or cost this many Nigerians, you know, and so on and so forth. But no, there's no one to do that. You know, there's no one to do that, because there's been no synergy within the government to take this matter seriously. But my hope is that now that the president and his government have now realized that this is a serious issue, I think they appear to be dealing with it. But one thing we cannot take away, I still think that it is not really respectable of the president to not have addressed Nigerians directly over this issue up till this moment, to the best of my knowledge.
You think he should have said something?
Should have addressed, and this requires a national address. Don't you see how the kind of arguments Nigerians are having on social media about this? Don't you see how it has further polarized the country and the society? You know, the slightest match that catches from somewhere now, it can lead to anything. So, but the president coming out and speaking to Nigerians, even if people are going to dismiss what he is going to say, even if people are going to disagree with him, just by coming out and speaking to Nigerians, that itself is leading. You know, but
you think it's not enough that we're hearing from the Minister of Information, that we're hearing from the Foreign Affairs Minister, that we're hearing from the Chief of Defense Staff, that we're hearing from his aide, that we're reading press statements released by the president? So you think all of that is not enough?
Absolutely not.
The president himself needs to speak directly to the
president is the commander-in-chief, but also the communicator-in-chief. We're in a democracy. You know, he wasn't appointed president. He was elected president, you know. So because he's elected, the part of the thing, his job is to speak to Nigerians, frankly speaking. So he has not done the commanding-in-chief much on this issue, nor has he done the communicating-in-chief much at this issue. And I think that's really important, you know, because in the case of the South African example that I was giving you earlier, Ramaphosa, he seized every single opportunity. Every day he was attending rallies. He was any small event that he was invited to publicly, he would speak about that. you know, and therefore helping to rally the nation across, you know, in one direction. Even when some people at the beginning, even within South Africa themselves, they wanted to exploit the situation, you know. So because the president has allowed the matter to rest, you know, that's why it has caused this much polarization, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you keep bringing the South Africa example, and if we have to draw parallels from what happened when President Trump alluded to white genocide of farmers in South Africa, which is something that was heavily disputed by the South African government, but also a significant part of the community, the white community in South Africa, have denounced those statements. But the American government went further by giving asylum to all those white minorities in South Africa if they need to come to America. And we saw that showpiece where 40-something of them took up that particular offer. And people questioned, why is there no asylum for Nigerian Christians if that is the case? What can the Nigerian government learn from the management, from how South Africa managed that particular situation? And is the issue different when you consider one is about race and the other is about religion?
Well, it isn't different at all, in my opinion. The fact that one is about race, you know, the very fact that you are accusing two African countries of genocide within a few months apart itself is remarkable. By itself, even for Nigerians, they ought to really reflect and think, oh, are we now doing genocide? We're not in Gaza here, for goodness sake. You understand? We're not the place where people, I mean, children and women and have been maimed and killed on live television, on live social media coverage. None of that is here, you know? So by the fact that somebody is coming out, the same person, the same set of people, mind you, coming out to say that, oh, South Africa is committing genocide of white people, you know, Nigeria is committing genocide of Christians, you know, within a few months apart, that by itself ought to really alarm people to think, oh, this might go beyond actually what these people are saying, because that's not true. It's simply not true, you know. And second, in South Africa, it remains the fact that whereas the blacks are more in number, the whites still have the economic power, you know, even the cultural power, because they own most of the media and so on and so forth. Believe me, if you say that Nigeria is a Christian country, if you make that argument that Nigeria is a Christian country, you will be 100% correct.
Why would you say that?
Because virtually every sector of Nigerian society, academia, media, that's popular culture, right? Media, film, you know, finance, banking. Are you getting what I'm saying? You know, the professionals, you know, pharmacists, doctors, lawyers, you know, the civil service, the bureaucracy, the military, you know, police, everything. In every of these sectors of Nigerian society, Christians are not only more in number, they have the most power in this country. I challenge anyone to, you know, to disagree, but give me facts. If you take,
what if the counter argument is, what about political power?
They have it more. They have it more. Yes, that's it. Political power does not come from vacuum. Political power builds on other kinds of power within society. That's what we always miss. You know, those of us who are born from the north here, we grew up with hearing that, oh, the North is the master of Nigeria. Northerners have political power. It has never been true.
Well, some would easily point, Dr. Suleiman, that the current administration has a Muslim president and a Muslim vice president. It has never happened with Christians before. So, ergo the argument that when it comes to political control or dominance, some would say if you have to consider religious.
But look at the president's. I will not allow you to lie. If you look, you know, just look at the president's appointments. Do you understand? From the service chiefs, for example, to everyone else, to his appointments in every other sector. How many are in number? How many are there? But I don't really want to be bogged down about who has more power or not more power. What's important is for people, for all of us, to realize that some dangers are collective, you know, and this is one of them. Anything somebody thinks on this issue, as far as I'm concerned, it's not an issue in which you can distinguish Christians. Because, for example, if Trump were to come here how is he going to, or these American soldiers are to, how would they know you are Christian and I am Muslim? How would they know that, you know, we are not both Muslims or we are not both Christians? The bond between Nigerians, among Nigerians, the bonds that we have, they are so close that these kinds of divisions cannot be made. There are many families, millions of families in this country where people have very different faiths and they live together. Where are you going to, where exactly are you going to go there? And why do you have to wait 15 years to now say, suddenly in the morning, you now want to protect Nigerian Christians? This does not mean that people have not been killed. You understand? And I don't even like the argument about more Muslims have been killed or more. It's as if those who have died, you know, don't matter, or that it's no longer a tragedy. You know, so I am not even looking at the idea that more Muslims have been killed than Christians, which is true, by the way. But the fact that that's not the issue right now.
Okay, so the counterpoint is that, especially to some of the people whose arguments I've listened to online,
yes,
offline,
yes.
On radio, on TV, is that who is doing the killing? And for the most part, that tells the story. Do you understand why people who are Christians in Nigeria and who are proponents for what's happening would take the argument from that point of view? That yes, there's this tragedy that's happening across all the communities, but which religion do these perpetrators align themselves with? And that's where the problem is for them.
Thank you very much. That's entirely correct. That majority of those who claim to, those who do the killing profess to be Muslims, you know, profess Islam, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that what they do on behalf of every Muslim. It does not also mean that what they do on behalf of Islam. Do you understand? If that were the case, then everybody on earth will be guilty of something by association. Because when people make this argument, they are making argument that they are saying that I Suleiman, will be guilty of what Abubakar Shekar does in Maiduguri. That's guilty by association. And that kind of guilt is neither in natural law nor in human-made law. People can only be responsible for what they themselves have done. Do you understand? So even if I were your son or your brother, you know, and I take up, you know, we're brothers, and I take up gun and go somewhere and do whatever, that doesn't concern you. I'll give you an example. When President Trump was shot sometime, I think, recently.
During the campaigns, right?
Exactly, you know. The father, and even recently when somebody, is it Jack Clark?
Yeah, Charlie Kirk. Right.
Charlie Kirk, thank you. It was his own father that took him to the police people. You understand, you know? So the fact that, you know, I am Muslim and somebody else is Muslim and that person commits a crime doesn't mean that he is doing it on my behalf, even if he says that. Right. And it doesn't make me guilty of his crime, even if he says that he is doing it on my behalf. Right. Do you understand? Yeah. You know, so if we make that argument, we are trying to say that all Muslims are terrorists, which is actually which will make things worse, not actually better. Right. Because it's the same kind of argument that the Americans are actually making now. Right. Yes.
Interestingly, Dr. Suleiman, a lot of these angles have been emerging over the last couple of days. China's response, ECOWAS message to America about this one. But as a final thought, in under a minute, because we have to go.
Thank you.
What do you think these interventions would do to de-escalate the tensions, not just internationally, but domestically?
Thank you. That's precisely the most important question for me now. Do you understand? You know, because even with all the broha, I just don't see how somebody is just going to land here and start, you know, putting military boots on the ground in the name of protest. Believe me, I never believed that. I was a lot more concerned about the raging fight among Nigerians over this issue than anything else. And I thought that by itself constituted a national security threat in its own right. So diffusing that, for me, is a lot more important than even the international dimension, you know, because the international dimension, you have procedure and so on and so forth, you know. But here, you know, anything can happen in Nigeria. Right. You understand? And we've been in this kind of situations before. And that's why I say that, again, the president is the one to lead this situation. If we see the president having a meeting with Khan leaders in public and with Muslim leaders in public, do you understand? If we see the Christian, the Khan president, you know, having a discussion at the same place with Sultan, you know, with the president there, with members of his cabinet, the president's cabinet, there are Muslims there are Christians there. It's even hard to tell who are even more in number. So these kinds of things, they have a symbolic effect, you know, on the system as a whole. Right. To see the president with Peter Obi, with Atiku, even the opposition, bring everyone on board to say that this is not a matter of politics, it's not a matter of religion or whatever. This is a national security, national sovereignty issue. Right. If you have that kind of rhetoric, chances are that even within the country, it's not like everybody will agree or whatever, but at least there will be a counter narrative to what is presently prevailing. Well, some would say, Dr. Suleiman, you can put that on your wish list, but there's very little chance that you will see the president, Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar, you know, agree on all these. It's actually not impossible. It's easy. It is probable. Dr. Suleiman, we're going to have to anchor the conversation here, but thank you so much for the analysis. I appreciate you very much for stopping by this evening. Thank you. And that is a wrap on tonight's edition of the program. Daily Politics returns tomorrow live and exclusive on Trust TV. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. We'll see you next time.